I want to talk about the outsized and really gross influence that police officer associations have on local politics. I was deeply embroiled in voter outreach for the local election in Fort Worth, Texas. We managed to help get two progressive candidates elected to city council, but boy, we got on the POAs radar, and they were sending out all sorts of BS mailers and copaganda to all the different communities that we were in, and trying to get out and activate folks. Fort Worth has got a really terrible history of voter turnout, like a lot of places in the U.S. Voter turnout was like 3% in 2019, but the work that the organization that I was a part of and several other groups, we managed to get a 14.5% voter turnout in this last election, and very nearly elected the first female Black mayor of Fort Worth in Fort Worth history. But the racist runoff election rules that are common in the South gave the moneyed interests and the police officer association plenty of opportunity to, get all those white votes out against the candidate of color for the mayor. So it was really uplifting to be a part of groups doing some really good direct work. Electoralism's got its limits, but every voice that we get onto city council is a step towards being able to make substantial structural changes to the way things are done, so that we get our communities actually taken care of. Fort Worth is home to the zip code with the lowest life expectancy in all of Texas, which for a city the size of ours is really egregious. Right. And some of the things that, the cops were including were, kind of like we all were talking about, like crime statistics over COVID. They're crying, murder's gone up so much percent, blah, blah, blah. This has gone up so much percent since the defund the police movement and all that kind of stuff, even though there's been like absolutely no legislation or material changes to the police funding in Fort Worth or many of the other kind of places that they listed on their propaganda.
Right here in New York this year, actually, with our local elections that just happened, the police union sort of had a tampered, tamped down, I guess you could say. They don't really hold the same power here in terms of, and they didn't really even come out for any candidate. I think at the last minute, the PBA went with Andrew Yang. They don't like Eric Adams, even though he's a former cop, because he was like one of those guys who was in like one of those groups. I think it was like 100 Black officers for police reform, which is like, still a pro cop group, but they somewhat sort of say that like, it needs reform. Things aren't right. We still need cops to do what they do, but we could do it. It's like sort of how he comes out and says how stop and frisk was being used wrong. It's a great tool other than that, though, besides the fact that it was being used to subjugate Black and Latino men to these horrible conditions and just invasion of their space and privacy and freedom, and just being held up against the wall for no reason and patted down and groped and grabbed. Besides that, it's a great tool, he would say.
Right. Yeah. And it's that kind of like BS and hypocrisy that like really frustrates the shit out of me. The lady who did wind up winning fourth mayoral seat, Maddie Parker, her biggest backers were the Fort Worth Police Officer Association and a handful of Fort Worth billionaires who bought the seat for her. I mean, their campaign outspent Deborah Peoples by like, I think $500,000 to $1 million, and still barely won the runoff by about 5,500, 6,000 votes out of almost 130,000 votes. And it was frustrating, but like one of the things that really got my goat, I don't know if y'all are familiar with Tatiana Jefferson, who was a few years back shot in her home by a Fort Worth police officer while she was playing video games with her nephew. And really, really gross, egregious, like police violence. And a part of why that happened, like structurally, is because like the city of Fort Worth negotiates certain like protocols and things with the police officer association, and they got a rule established some years back where senior officers get shift preference. So the longer you're on the force, the more you get to choose like when and where you're working, and so all the senior officers wind up taking shifts in the daytime in the more affluent neighborhoods and leave the rookies by themselves to work the late night shifts in the more neglected and poor communities where crime is a little more prevalent. And they don't have that more like level-headed, like senior, there's no safety net for them or anything like that. They're just out there by themselves, these rookies, and making really poor, inexperienced calls. And that it was that situation that led to Tatiana Jefferson being murdered in her home while minding her own business. And Maddie Parker, before she got the mayoral seat, she was our former mayor, Betsy Price's, one of her staffers and like her protege. And Maddie Parker handled the last renegotiation with the POA about these kinds of policies and left that specific policy in place.
Right. So
that's still that issue that led to her death is still a present problem. Right. And it's really frustrating.
I hear you completely.
I've got like
I know
one of my best.
Tony, I'm gonna have to. I know you're probably used to the long form calls on Doom.
I don't want to take up time, but I appreciate y'all taking the call.
Let me just thank you for calling in, and hopefully I'll talk to you some more tonight. Take care, Tony.
Yeah, I'll call in tonight. Take care.